This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include syndicated columnist John Hood, former state representative Connie Wilson, former state senator Howard Lee, and current Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch. Well, this week, the legislature convened to swear in new members, select leadership, and organize for the session that begins in earnest on January 28th. Since what they do is going to affect our lives in so many ways, we're going to devote the entire show this week to the 2015 session of the General Assembly. We might say the 2013 session, which ended last summer, was one that had a theme of reform. Question one to all of you. In looking at what lawmakers have before them on their agenda, what are you going to say would be the theme for this year's session, looking ahead? John?
I guess I would describe it as something like stage two. If you imagine the first biennial session under Republican Governor McCrory, the legislature is kind of the first stage of the rocket, and it's blasted and the stage is dropped off, and now the second stage is kicking in. I don't think that's a change of direction. I think it's continuing momentum in more or less the same direction they were going. But it's true that some of the actions that they took, some of the issues they addressed, they pretty much did the initial work in that they've talked about, promised, and perhaps now they need to focus on other parts of their agenda.
Connie, what do you say would be the theme for this session?
I really think that the high pace speed that they were going at before is not going to be what we see this session. I think they're going to take more time to talk and work out issues and develop consensus. We keep hearing over and over again that jobs are very important, and so they'll be looking at legislation that deals with that issue. But I think that tone is going to be very different, and you could even hear it today. It's going to be refreshing because the last 4 years have worn us out, and we're looking for a little bit more normal pace.
Howard, what do you think the theme is going to be?
I think I tend to agree with John. It's going to be thoughtful reform. I see them spending a lot of time looking at how we actually going to pay our teachers. I think they will look at reforms in the area of incentives for business, and so I think it will be a continuation. I'd like to call it a reform rerun.
Chris, what's your theme?
I'm not so sure I disagree with anything that's been said. I think they're going to stay the wrong course in my view, but I think they'll stay with it. I don't think you'll see a lot of bold initiatives in any one area. I think they'll try to take up Medicaid reform. We'll talk about that later. I think the other subtext of the session is Governor McCrory now has 2 years as governor. He's made some staff changes. He's running for re-election. He has some very specific things he wants. So I think he wants to be a much bigger player, and I think that will determine how far the legislators' priorities go.
Well, you touched on something. You wrote a column this week, 3 leaders, how many agendas? We've got the House with new leadership. We've got the Senate leadership. We've got the governor. The big question most people I know are asking is how well these guys going to play together. I want everybody to answer that, but I'll start with you.
Well, I think that there's clearly differences on a lot of things. Medicaid, the governor has talked about Medicaid expansion, coming up with his own plan, getting waivers from the federal government. The first day of the session, Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger and Speaker Moore both said they don't want to do that. I think there's a lot of disagreement about how to go ahead with business incentives. I think there still are fundamental differences between the governor and the General Assembly, especially the Senate leadership. The big question mark is where Speaker Moore falls. Will he be a close ally of Governor McCrory like Speaker Tillis, or will he chart his own course, either independently or work more closely with Phil Berger?
What's your guess as to the relationships?
Yeah, I don't know Speaker Moore that well, but my feeling right now is that he's going to be a very balanced and reasonable leader. I think that he probably will fall more into the category of being closer to the governor than the President Pro Tem has demonstrated up to this point. But I think in the final analysis, all of these fellows are going to grow up and act like big boys. We'll be coming into 2016, and I don't think that they're going to want to put themselves in too much jeopardy in jeopardizing possibilities going forward.
What do you think? How are they going to get together?
Well, Speaker Moore has been very accommodating to his caucus in saying that we're going to be more inclusive and listening to other people, what they're interested in doing within the caucus. And even the rules that they adopted today are much more inclusive, where a committee chairman can't pocket veto a bill. And I think that's really going to impact how he does work with Governor McCrory, because it's going to depend on what the Republican House caucus wants to do. So there's some new dynamics going on there that's going to play into how the chambers work together with the governor.
What do you think?
Here's what I saw. The first day of session, the new Speaker of the House, Tim Moore, Senate Leader Phil Berger, were talking to reporters. They were asked a question about Pat McCrory and the recent allegations about whether he had disclosed enough information about his business interests before he became governor. And there had been, at least on the Senate side, some people back, months ago, even years ago, who were taking shots at the governor. What I noticed is that both of these fellows basically said it's all politically motivated. These are not serious charges against the governor's ethics. I thought that signaled an unwillingness to at least aggravate whatever rifts are already there, and maybe some interest in
no salt rubbing in the wound type of situation. I thought it was very interesting. Speaker Moore had Jack Hunt, who is also from Cleveland County, on the floor with him as he was being sworn in. I thought it was a very symbolic gesture. He was reaching across the aisle. Hunt was a Democrat, longtime member of the House, and I thought that was good. Howard, we talked about many times the decline of influence in rural counties in this state. And yet here we got a speaker that's from a rural county. We got a president pro tem from a rural county. Just how much influence are the rural counties going to have in this session?
I don't think the rural counties will have any more influence than they've had in the past. It's unfortunate that we've had leaders who have kind of overlooked them and spent more time thinking about the urban areas. I think one of the bigger problems is going to be how this legislature decides to work with local government. And if they extend an olive branch to local governments, then rural sections could very well benefit from partnering with urban areas as well.
Well, we're excited to announce some new program changes for NC Spin viewers in the Charlotte and Greensboro, Winston-Salem High Point markets. Starting next Sunday, February 1st, NC Spin is going to begin airing on WCCB Charlotte CW18 on Sunday mornings at 6:30. And on that same day, we're going to begin airing on WXLV ABC 45 at 7:30 in the Triad market. Two great news stations. So make a note and be sure to tell your friends beginning February 1st, NC Spin on WCCB Charlotte CW18 and on WXLV ABC 45. Of course, you can always watch us on YouTube and see additional video content on our website, ncspin.com. Balanced debate for the old North State. When we come back, we're going to talk about Medicaid and the budget.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Phones are getting smarter, cars more efficient, TVs bigger and more stunning. Imagine the same innovation from agriculture. Meet the Plant Sciences Initiative at NC State, a proposed state-of-the-art research complex where world-class researchers will tackle agriculture's toughest challenges, like feeding the world's rapidly growing population while preserving natural resources for future generations. Join Farm Bureau and NC State in moving North Carolina to the forefront of ag research in the world. Visit keepaggrowing.org.
Every year, North Carolina patients undergo 635,000 same-day surgeries. 72% of these surgeries are performed in our highest-cost hospital facilities, adding as much as $2,000 to every procedure. The state's outdated Certificate of Need law prevents competition from lower-cost, higher-quality same-day surgery centers, inflating healthcare costs and limiting patient choice. Tell state lawmakers it's time to lower healthcare costs now. It's time to make a simple fix to an outdated law, increasing patient choice and lowering healthcare costs now. You can help. Visit reformconnow.com and tell lawmakers it's time for a simple fix to an outdated law. It's time to lower healthcare costs now.
How will North Carolina compete in a future where everything is accelerated? Join state leaders February 9th and 10th at the Raleigh Convention Center for the 30th Annual Emerging Issues Forum. Explore how innovators are thriving and how North Carolina can keep pace. Register now at emergingissues.org.
We now return to NC Spin.
We continue our soup to nuts analysis of this 2015 legislative session that is going to be starting in earnest January 28th. Howard, the biggest piece of business that the legislature has to attempt, obviously, is the budget. Now, we've been hearing an awful lot about the fact that revenues were lower than they have been this past year. We got a new tax cut that's actually taking place in the 2015 year, in that there's a flat tax for individuals' personal income tax rate. So how big a problem and how big a factor is that going to be as they're building this budget?
I think it's certainly going to kick in and have some impact on making it difficult to balance things out. I don't know how much of an impact it will have in the long run, but I think it's going to be a whole lot more challenging than what will appear to be the case on the surface right now. Okay,
Chris, you've been saying that the big problem budget-wise is not going to be in this calendar year, but it's going to start in the budget year that starts July 1.
Well, I mean, I think the cost of this tax cut is going to be higher than we originally thought. We've already raised it from just over $500 million to now $700 million. In addition to that, we learned this past week that revenues after the last month's collections are $200 million below what's projected. That's a lot. It's still not unmanageable in a $20 billion budget. The question is what will happen in April. I mean, I think a lot of these questions are premature. The early signs aren't good, however. And remember, there are some things the General Assembly wants to do. We're going to talk about giving teachers a raise. The courts are vastly underfunded. There's a lot of other things that people want to spend some money on, and there might not be any money to spend.
And Connie, one of the things that while we're talking about financial issues, the Revenue Laws Committee is coming up with the idea that perhaps they're going to rearrange the way they distribute sales tax revenues, and instead of doing it at a point of sale, largely at a point of sale, they're going to do it on a per capita basis. How's that going to play out? Is that going to pass?
Actually, that's a thought that is supported by Senator Harry Brown, who's from Onslow County, and I think he also has Greene County. And it's something that's percolating out there. There's no guarantee it's going to pass, but people are looking at that, and so it would dramatically impact urban areas and how much they've been receiving.
And John, you've been saying for years that the way to fix all this budget stuff is just go to a zero-based budget. Why can't that notion take hold like it once did?
Well, it's easy to talk about zero-based budgeting, which is why I do it, but actually to do it, and I think they should, but it requires a lot of effort. It takes some time. It has to be done probably department by department, maybe 1 or 2 departments a year, but they ought to do that. And yes, right now, halfway through the fiscal year, we've got about a $200 million number below expectations. But as Chris says, even though that is potentially troubling, a lot of the big shoes haven't dropped yet. We don't really know what the collections are going to look like after people comply with the income tax code for the first time.
If there's an 800-pound gorilla in both chambers of this legislature, Connie, it's got to be Medicaid reform and conversely, or additionally, Medicaid expansion. We talked last week about the stalemate between the House and Senate. You spend a lot of time over in the building. Just how serious are these differences?
Well, like you said, the House and Senate have been wrestling over this issue for several years now, and it really comes down to one question, and it's whether the Medicaid system is broken or not. And for those people who don't think it's broken, they don't want to do major changes. And then there's another group that says it is broken, and a lot of them are in the Senate. Until they agree on the broken issue, they're not going to come to an agreement, and I don't see that changing much anytime soon.
And so, therefore, does that mean the Medicaid expansion discussion is off the table? I was interested this week, Gary Pierce, who all of us know, has started referring to Medicaid expansion as McCrory Care. I don't know whether you've heard that or not, because the governor wants to tie this to jobs and employment and so forth like that. What do you think about the expansion issue, Howard?
Well, I think that's probably going to be dormant for a while. I noticed that both speakers today, both leaders today, carefully avoided bringing that subject up. So I'm of the opinion that they hope it'll go away.
Several other real quick issues we'd like to cover. Fracking. The Mining Commission has finished their recommendations. They are ready for the legislature to lift the ban on fracking permits. Is that going to happen?
Oh, I think there'll be, the question isn't whether or not there'll be fracking permits. The question is what industries will seek them. There's been a lot of discussion. There might not be nearly as much gas. There might be not a lot of big oil companies coming in here to drill. The concern is there'll be some wildcat oil companies coming in here with taking big gambles and not following the rules, which, by the way, aren't strict enough.
And we talked also about the $1 billion transportation package that the governor wants to put out. We heard that the superintendents this past week came out and said they want a major bond initiative to build new schools. How much appetite is there going to be for the legislature to pass a big bond?
Well, they're certainly not going to do two big bonds, and this is a 30-year or more fight. Every time there's a proposal to do a big bond for schools, those who are interested in transportation get upset, and every time there's a big discussion about bond for transportation, people in the school side get upset because they seem to think that each side seems to think they should be at the top of the list.
Yeah. One's exclusive of the other, and of course the question you raised a couple of weeks ago is how they're going to pay for all
That's
of it.
really the question with any bond is you got to pay it back. It's not revenue, it's debt.
Well, so I'm satisfied we probably will talk about this once or twice more before this session ends, whenever that may happen to be. After these messages, education.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
I was asked by someone months ago, isn't Medicaid in North Carolina broken? And my answer was no. There are parts of it that need to be improved. There are parts that need to be changed. But the whole system's not broken. There are a lot of things that are working very well. What is working well is that we have a physician-led, physician-guided team effort. It's built on the concept of physicians having medical homes, patients having medical homes. And that system that we've created in North Carolina has done wonderful work. It has saved money, it's improved quality, and we have data that demonstrates that. That's what we need to retain, that's what we need to build upon. We don't need to replace that.
North Carolina's Family Physicians supports Medicaid reform that builds on our state's foundation of medical homes. OurNCHealthcare.com.
Does your North Carolina business or organization have a story to tell? I'm Richard Campbell, and at Carolina Broadcasting and Publishing, we help tell stories that connect you to the people who will respond. We take the time to understand our clients' needs and what makes them unique. We craft their stories through the efficient use of words, images, and videos that resonate with their desired audience. We also know that a good story is incomplete without a call to action. On video, on air, online, and in print, from concept to final production, no one can help tell your story more effectively or affordably than we can. For special introductory offers, visit carolinabroadcasting.com or call 919-832-1416. Again, that's carolinabroadcasting.com. Let us help tell your story today.
We now return to NC Spin.
Continuing our look at the 2015 session of the legislature, education is always one of the prime topics of discussion. I want to ask all of our panelists, what education initiatives do you expect to emerge from this session? Howard, we'll start with you.
Well, I certainly think teacher pay and how we administer that whole process is going to be very much on the agenda. I think that there's going to continue to be debate on the Common Core idea of whether or not North Carolina is going to have its own rigorous standards. So those two issues, I think, are going to be front and center.
Chris?
I agree that those will be front and center. I think virtual charter schools, the State Board of Education was mandated by the last session of the General Assembly to approve two. There are some big concerns about both the companies, but one of the companies in particular. It'll be interesting to see if that results in some sort of legislation. I think we'll see pushes to expand the voucher program, which I don't think is a good idea, but I think that will certainly be that'll certainly be considered. I think we're going to see the Read to Achieve, the whole reading program revisited to make sure that that is working the way Senator Berger believes it ought to work. I think education, actually, there's numerous ones. This will be, in a session where there won't be one giant initiative, I think these pieces of education will take up a lot of lawmakers' time.
John?
Tom, watch this particular iteration of what Howard was referring to regarding Common Core, and that's the testing program. There's a contingent of folks in the legislature, Democrats and Republicans, who are basically resisting the whole idea of the current amount of testing. They want to reduce the amount of testing, but because school systems want to continue to use their diagnostics internally, what they're looking at is maybe getting rid of end-of-grade testing for some grades. Then there's another group of Democrats and Republicans in and outside the legislature who say, wait, whoa, if we get rid of our test program, then we can't evaluate school reforms and all sorts of. So this is a real tug and pull that I'm not sure which way it's going to go.
Connie, what do you think the education issues are going to be?
Speaker Tillis announced today that he really wants to push for public-private partnerships with
You mean Speaker Moore?
Speaker Moore.
Oh, God, you know.
You're going to have to get
I got to get retrained. I'm really slow. I'll get it. Give me one more month. I'm still writing checks 2014. A few more days, I'll be there.
Yeah.
But anyway, Speaker Moore announced today when he had his acceptance speech that he wanted public-private partnerships with charitable nonprofits to work with kids after school. And that's very important for so many kids, those extra hours after school where they can have that additional attention. And that's really an education reform. And I think you'll see the Senate really pushing for teacher incentive pay raises. They're going to be looking at how to raise teacher pay raises, but they want some accountability that's in there for why you get
Chris, one of the things the legislature did was to mandate that report cards be released, A through F grades on all the public schools in North Carolina. The school board, the State Board of Education postponed that for a year. It's going to come up again. I know the legislature per se is not going to act on it, but do you think that whole issue might be revisited by our lawmakers?
I think it should be. It'd be interesting to see. I mean, in states that have, it's been fascinating to watch. You can tell a parent that they have a school, instead of getting 4 stars, gets 2 stars, and they're really concerned and they want to know what's going on at the school. If you say a school got a D or an F, they automatically try to pull their kids out and think the world is ending, even though the school did exactly the same. It's just graded differently. I think there's reason for concern about that. I'm not sure the General Assembly is going to take it back up unless the state board moves to delay it further.
How about if there's a big hue and cry from the parents throughout North Carolina? Do you think it'll make any difference?
I think accountability is extremely important to this General Assembly, and they want people to know what's going on.
Well, after these messages, we're going to ask our panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Hi, I'm Linda Loveland. I want the best for my kids. Feeding them foods they like within my budget is a priority. But what do we really know about these foods? North Carolina farmers and food experts give you a website to find it all. FeedTheDialogueNC.com, a place where moms like you and me can learn more about the foods we eat and the farmers that feed us. Check it out. Add your input and help feed the dialogue. Let's talk food at FeedTheDialogueNC.com.
Nobody ever imagined a mammogram machine being subject to CON law. If I want to invest our business dollars into technology that I think is going to benefit my patients, my customers, we should be able to do that. I think it's time to take a law that was intended to protect the citizens of North Carolina and now is harming them and change it. I'm Dr. Bruce Schroeder, and I support CON reform.
Visit reformconnow.com.
How will North Carolina compete in a future where everything is accelerated? Join state leaders February 9th and 10th at the Raleigh Convention Center for the 30th Annual Emerging Issues Forum. Explore how innovators are thriving and how North Carolina can keep pace. Register now at emergingissues.org.
Medicaid system is not a perfect system. There are things that could be changed, but there's a lot that's going well with the system. Community Care of North Carolina is in place. It's a team of nurses, advisors, caregivers who help us out. We want to call and say, look, I've got Miss So-and-so here. She needs to have her weight checked each day because she's got congestive heart failure. Can you send one of those monitors out to the house and keep an eye on this and let me know if her weight goes up too much, because if it does, she's retaining fluid and she's going to be back in the hospital. We work together with them. That's a great system. It saves a lot of money. It's proven to work. We're not opposed to changing the things that need to be changed, but let's not throw out everything that we worked for the past 15 to 20 years.
North Carolina's Family Physicians supports Medicaid reform that builds on our state's foundation of medical homes. OurNCHealthcare.com.
We now return to NC Spin.
Well, we've enjoyed the discussion about our legislative session. We're going to ask our panelists right now to tell us something we don't know. John Hood, I'll start with you.
We talked during the program about potentially bond issues for transportation or even education. That issue prompted me to go back and look at the latest rankings for North Carolina compared to the rest of the country in debt. And actually, we're still a very low debt state by national standards, but depending upon the measure, we're either ranked 39th or 42nd in bonded debt or total debt per capita or as a percentage of GDP. It's not an argument necessarily for borrowing more money, but if people think, well, the debts always are out of control, in North Carolina, relatively speaking, we've still kept the debt low.
Tell us something we don't know, Connie.
Well, this week, Wednesday, was a fun day at the General Assembly because with the swearing in, you had all the families there. And the cutest thing I saw was Representative Jason Sain with his little son Jackson. They were in matching outfits with matching red bow ties and really adorable. It's refreshing to see the families there because they're the people standing behind these legislators letting them serve.
How about you, Howard?
Well, you know, North Carolina certainly, educationally, is at a good place. It's not the lowest and it's not the highest, but we're kind of steady. But the years when we were making our greatest progress, the business community had a direct impact and involvement in education. That went away over the last few years, but I'm delighted that we have an organization called Best North Carolina that is back on the forefront with a strategic plan that they will be revealing, which I think will put business back engaged in education.
And are very involved in education initiatives.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no question about it. Tell us something we don't know, Chris.
Not too long ago, Republicans and some public interest groups, including coalitions, bipartisan coalitions, thought if a legislative leader served more than 2 terms in office, that was a problem. There was a call for legislative term limits. The House passed one to say a speaker or president pro tem should only serve 2 terms. Senate President Pro Tem Philberger, when he was elected in 2011, said this is an issue the Senate is going to take up. They passed a bill with longer terms. The House passed one limiting it to 2 terms. I thought it was fascinating that Senator Berger was reelected today to his 3rd term in the General Assembly, and nobody raised a peep about. I thought we were trying to keep these 2 jobs to 2 terms. Whatever happened to that term limits bill?
Interesting. I guarantee you we probably won't be hearing much more about that for a few years to come. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, read our weekly column, visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. Don't forget now, beginning next Sunday, we're going to have new affiliates in the Charlotte and Greensboro markets, and you'll find out more information about that on ncspin.com. Well, next week, we're going to take on more issues of interest to the people of North Carolina. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.